to advanced session, and we would like you to post short comments and ideas and thoughts and your experiences in the forums. We've already added a few to get you started, and I'll mention each time as we go along. So, engaging learners. It is quite a daunting subject, I have to say, and that expression on that girl's face there reminds me very much of the almost 3 decades when I used to teach languages in a high school in the north of England, and I would have 32 students with that expression, or even worse, daring me to make them interested in German. And hopefully your learners are a lot less of a challenge, but nevertheless, it is very important to get learners engaged and on board, if you like, in the early stages, and then to keep them interested and motivated. So obviously, the trite answer is, well, you need to use really exciting activities, sing and dance, and in language teachers, we literally do sing and dance and flashy, shiny things. Well, that's true to an extent, but this presentation, this is going to be quite a different approach, actually. And we're not going to go into the flashy and shiny things. We're going to go into the foundations, the backbone, if you like. And to me, you won't get them engaged in any of these flashy, shiny, exciting, innovative activities unless you've actually built a relationship with the learner. And it's not just learner-teacher relationship. It's also relationships in a sense of community with other learners in the group. And that's the same face-to-face as it is online. The horse pictures are because Helen likes horses, so I thought she might enjoy some horse pictures as we go along. So what we're going to explore, first of all, we're going to do it in 2 parts. And first is early engagement is what I call it. So with the nautical theme there, getting the learners on board. How can you get their attention and their engagement from the time they log in or when they first start the course in the first week? But then, obviously, even more important, how can you maintain that engagement? In other words, keeping them afloat, if you like. And so we'll look at it from those 2 aspects and hope to have some contributions from you. So in actual fact, kind of unintentionally, I didn't do this intentionally, but continuing the nautical theme, I'm going to first talk about icebreakers. And if you've got any ideas for icebreakers, post them in our forum, and Helen can read some out later on. Forum is okay, it's a very old, well-used activity, but it's also very, very versatile, and it's good for icebreakers. I'll mention Glossary as well. So yes, of course, you can have the usual introduce yourself forum. We have one on our Learn MoodleMoot, but there are other ways that you can get learners to give information about themselves and break the ice, even if they already know each other, just to get things started. And incidentally, we've had brilliant examples of this in our global MoodleMoot with the online selfies and the chocolate and the coffee and so on. So here are a few ideas from me. Nothing's new or innovative, but this is one that I've seen used that's quite nice. So you have your learners introduce themselves, but they have to say 3 statements which are true, and then 1 which is not true. And then you wait a certain period of time. So here's Mark. You wait a certain period of time, and then you actually tell them. And it's quite simple, but it's quite fun. And also it gets them to know each other and find out about each other. Mark here, Barbara is reading it and hoping that number 2 is not the lie, where he says he's looking forward to meeting them all face to face. We would have to see. So that's 1. Now, another one is actually one that we used in the Learn MoodleMoot, the most recent Learn MoodleMoot. We always have a forum where people can introduce yourselves, but the MOOC that we normally run twice a year, and you can sign up for the next one, which starts on October the 5th, although we might have a bit of a surprise for you sooner, but we did an extra one this year because of COVID. So we had an icebreaker, the view from your window, bearing in mind, of course, that almost the whole world and the people who were on our MOOC were stuck at home, so all they could see was out of their window. And it was great seeing the different climates and weather from snow to sun, quite a variety of animals. And then, of course, there were the people who said, well, I'm in a room without a window, so they shared the view of their wall. I'm just looking at my wall. It's got lots of Russian grammar and vocabulary and so on pinned to it with blue tack. So that's another one. These are educational, but they do get learners on your side and have a sense of community, and that's really important. Now, I have actually seen this used in an English as a second language course, but it's also an icebreaker. I don't know what the rule is with Twitter anymore, but it used to be that you had to make a statement in a very few characters. So if you take that one stage further, and spoiler alert here, there's a spoiler alert, these students are asked to describe or tell a story and in this particular instance, it's 15 words. It could be your choice. Turn on the word count in the forum. So again, spoiler alert, Barbara actually relates a real novel, one Agatha Christie mystery. I think Brian's made up his story. And it's just fun. It's just something to get them all logged in. And hopefully, if they've logged in, then they will actually go and take a look at the rest of the course. Right, let's look at glossary as another example. This one isn't new. This has long been used, but just because it's not new doesn't mean it's good or effective. So what you do then is you add a glossary and you invite people to introduce themselves as a glossary entry. So they put their name, Rob Bizdelnik, he doesn't do anything. And he's added a picture. You need to tell them to add a picture in the Atto editor with the icon rather than as an attachment. And then you add your random glossary entry block. And if you leave it to 0 days, then what that will do is each time they come to it or the page is refreshed, they will see a new member of the course. And this works very well because, if I move on, not only do you see the name and the picture and the information, but because you're using the Atto editor, it's possible for course participants to add a video of themselves or an audio file. So here we've got Molly Maladietz, who is of course excellent, and she's giving a little talk using the audio in Atto. Okay, so those are sort of not necessarily educational ways of getting yourself engaged, but on a slightly more serious note, if you like, although it's all serious, it has been thought, and some people suggest and find, that if at the start of the course you have your learners state in black and white their intentions, what their plan is and what grade they want, when they intend to complete everything, it engages them, keeps them motivated and aiming towards or focusing towards a goal. I read this paper, it only came out in June, I only read it a couple of weeks ago, literally, which explores a lot of ways of keeping learners involved and on track to meet their goal and to pass. Quite disheartening in some respects, and this amongst them, because this does seem to work just at the beginning in early engagement, doesn't really make much of a difference long term. But if you want to do that, and we're into trying anything that might work even for a short period of time, the blog is quite good attached to a profile because they can keep it private or they can make it public. You can also use, amongst the more obvious ones like forum, you could use feedback. Feedback isn't only for at the end of the course when your learners are telling you what they thought and how you could improve it. You can actually put a feedback activity at the beginning, asking them questions as to how long they intend to spend studying and what they're aiming for and so on. So these are some things to think about. Now, I mentioned icebreakers, I mentioned feedback. I'm just going to stop for a minute and I'm going to pass over to Helen and see if we have any other thoughts of what people have said.
Thanks, Mary. We do have a couple of posts already in the discussion. We have Ulrika, who posts saying, let's students introduce themselves by saying what keys they have on their keychain.
I love that. Not heard of that. I've not got my keychain with me, but mine is massive with hundreds of keys, with one that says Moodle on it, by the way. I bought one from the Moodle shop. Okay.
And Anna has posted with a few suggestions, one of which is sharing a window view, which you mentioned as well. But another one, which music you prefer and why. Provide 5 songs of different styles, classic, rock, pop, folklore, jazz, and ask learners to choose one and justify why. And you could also use this idea with images or paintings.
Oh, I like that, especially the paintings one. Well, I don't listen to a lot of music, although but the painting, yeah. Thank you. You see, what we do, Helen and I, when we do these sessions, is we get great ideas of other people that we can then use in the courses we create. But, you know, maybe we should keep that to ourselves. But it's excellent. Okay, shall we move on then?
There was one more idea from Anna, actually, which I really like. She says, share something unique about you. Ask learners to share something unique and perhaps a bit personal about themselves, something they love doing or something that characterises them.
That's very good too. It makes you think, what would you share? Yeah. And I don't know. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Anna, and thanks, Ulrika. And anyone else, please do contribute to the discussion thread there.
Okay, yes, there's several others which you can reply to as we go along. I'll give you a heads up for the next one. But now we're going to look at maintaining engagements. So in other words, we've got them on the boat. We want to keep the boat and the learners afloat. So where's the magic wand? What is the magic words or the secrets to keep them interested throughout the course? Because, you know, early engagement, it is kind of a honeymoon period anyway. They're curious, they're keen, they've just started. What's the secret to getting them involved and to keep going, basically? Well, there's no surprise that, of course, there is no magic wand. And increasingly, I think, basically, it's just a question of finding what works for your learners. In your situation, I'm sorry there's no answer, but that's the way it is. And how they get engaged depends very much on the subject, on their environment, on the types of learners, even on you, the type of teacher. But we still have another 3/4 of an hour, so we're going to have to think of something then. I wanted to just go back to the paper I read that came out in June, where they did a large-scale study of this, or looked in detail. And one of the things that does actually work, and it's quite straightforward and uninteresting, but it is effective, is that basically teachers, and I'll read you the quote and explain it for non-native speakers, teachers should have a tinker's mindset. And tinkering, the verb to tinker, basically means just to keep making small changes as you go along to improve things. And it's that, more than a lot of other things, that makes your courses increasingly successful and then can increase the engagement over time. Something that Helen and I do in our MOOC, each time we run it, we have a feedback session, me and Helen, and sometimes we only change 1 or 2 words, or we move an activity into a different section. But these help to maintain the engagement and to some degree to increase the success. So there's nothing exciting, or there's no singing and dancing in this session, just, you know, common sense things that we hope will help you. It's all to do, again, with the relationships and with this sense of community, knowing your learners, which is why I'm going to talk about supporting them and giving them feedback. If they feel that they are important and that you care about them, they're going to want to carry on, you know, to continue. So in terms of support and feedback, interestingly, yesterday we talked about the Moodle Educator Certification, and we cover in that program 22 competencies of digital educators, and one of them is actual feedback and planning. And look at the words there: timely, targeted support, a range of feedback, appropriate. All words that really connect with knowing your learners, supporting them and giving them appropriate feedback. Moodle has lots of different options for supporting them, and please type in the forums for when we stop again in a few minutes your thoughts on giving support to your learners. We have the messaging, and actually we've been using group messaging in this global online moot. There is the help desk, if any of you have posted in the help desk, that's the group messaging, which you can turn on if enabled by the admin. But again, you've got to be very careful, because although that's handy for the teacher, here's handsome Mr. Wilson, that's handy for him to message the whole group, sometimes that's inappropriate because Francis here is a bit scared or daunted by what he's talking about. So he's mindful enough to then go and message her privately and suggest a one-to-one. So it's all about finding the right or the more appropriate ways of giving them support, either the whole group or one-to-one. Now, the other word that I mentioned was feedback. Hattie, of course, in there is the main feedback large-scale man. And one of the quotes that you see quite often is, and I agree, feedback is one of the most powerful influences on learning and achievement, but its impact can be either positive or negative. And this is absolutely true, because very often young children and even adults, we become what people tell us we are. You know, and you tell someone that they're stupid or they're no good at it, and then they become, silly and no good at it, or the opposite. To a degree, but your words and how you phrase them in your feedback are very, very important. And you need to be giving your feedback on a regular basis to your learners, but not too much, and to try and connect with them. Now, it's such a wide-ranging topic, and please type your comments in the forum. So I thought we'll just do one little kind of very light-hearted, fun exercise here. Feedback is also quite cultural. I think the way we give or word our feedback in the West is different, and there's a different approach in the East and in Asia. So mine is kind of a Western approach. Mark has submitted an assignment on Moodle, and he got 60%. So it's okay, but he needs to resubmit and try and do better. So teacher Mr. Wilson has given him some feedback, and he's given 4 different feedbacks. So I'll read it to you in case it's too small for you. Same assignment, 4 different feedbacks. You don't need to post in the forums. Just think to yourself, would I choose number 1, 2, 3, or 4? So number 1 says, this is really poor. Do it again. Number 2 says, good start, Mark. And I know you found the subject difficult. When you resubmit, try to include 3 reasons for the event. Justify each one. Remember to spell check your work. I look forward to reading your next draft. Number 3, great, lovely work, lots of good ideas. If you want to resubmit, I can guarantee you an improved grade. And number 4, not bad, but you could do better if you try again. Okay, so it's up to you which one you would use. Which one, would you? Personally, I would go for number 2 because it's encouraging, good start. I know you found it difficult, but also there is an element of expectation in there, but on a positive side. When you resubmit, not, well, if you want to resubmit. And I look forward to reading your draft, quite the opposite from the number 3, which is, it's not great work, it's not lovely work, it's 60%, it's just okay. And how can you guarantee a grade? And the other 2, number 1 and number 4, are kind of either too nondescript or too negative, at least in Western culture. So that's the thought anyway. But I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to go over to you and see if you have any thoughts. We've only got a few minutes, and we could have a whole session just on this. But Helen.
Thanks, Mary. So we already have a couple of comments in our discussion thread. One from Tim, who says, sometimes doing practice when you get feedback from the teacher can be intimidating. Sometimes it's good to practice basic skills with just the computer watching. That is, use a quiz with unlimited attempts, automatic feedback and random questions.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's kind of like you're formatively being assessed, and there's no grade in the grade book. You're just practicing. And I absolutely agree, yeah. And of course, it's the quiz. So Tim would say that, but he's absolutely right, okay.
I can maybe just mention one of my ideas, the kind of feedback I like is what we have on Moodle.org in the forums. We've got ratings enabled and just a very, very simple one-item scale so that you can just rate a forum post as useful or not rated. So there's nothing negative at all, and it just counts up how many people rate it as useful.
Yeah, and it's also, there was a request in our global moot for like. So it's a bit like, isn't it? Although like has its problems, because I notice sometimes if you're on Twitter, for instance, like doesn't necessarily mean I like the post if it's a negative post. It's just an acknowledgement. But our useful grade rating, I think, is very useful, yes. Anna's saying there, feedback must be mindful, and especially if it's a major assignment, you must have a clear mind and focus on what you're doing. Quality feedback's not something you can do under pressure. And I think Anna's speaking from experience there as the MEC coordinator, giving feedback for our MEC facilitators. Absolutely. A nice post from Joost saying a teacher may also want to use the learning community, i.e. course peers, to provide support and feedback through forums. That's like what I've been discussing with the ratings enabled and making sure that students are able to rate, not just teachers. Yes. He goes on to say the reply privately bit helps answering a participant's question in a safe and friendly manner. Also, with forums, try to make sure you have a good set of rules of engagement or etiquette in place so people know how to respond to each other. Yeah, very good, yes. It also says, it's a very informative post, providing formative or summative feedback as a teacher is an art, and not everyone knows how to do this in an effective manner. The best way to think about this, and you've told me this, Mary, is the sandwich method, say that. Where you basically package the points for improvement together with points you found the participant was really good at. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, many years of trying to say nice things about very difficult teenage students is that's based on, yes. Although somewhere I did read someone who was completely against it, actually. But anyway, shall we move on? We've got one more if it's time. Yeah. A post from Steve, who says, as well as frequency, timing of feedback is also really important. For example, feeding back on an assignment in time for the learner to apply any feedback and tips to their next assignment. It's like feed forward rather than feedback. Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right, let's move on. I'm going to be asking you again for some thoughts shortly. I think we're mentioning gamification, yes, but not just yet. For now, I'm just pointing you to another digital competence there in our MEC program, which is to do with actively engaging learners. And the key words there, active and creative. So I'm going to mention 3 words which I think are very important in terms of maintaining student involvement, motivation, and they are responsibility, interactivity, I mean interacting with other learners, and creativity. So what can you do in your Moodle course to enable these? Because again, if a learner feels they're important in the course, they have some kind of responsibility, or they're actually doing stuff with and for other people, again, they are more engaged. And again, it takes us back to the relationship side. So here's just a few thoughts. In forums, which are so versatile, you can give a student a forum moderator role. Forums don't only have to be for questions and answers, of course, it can be on other topics. And if you're giving them the moderator role, it doesn't only mean that that allows them to remove inappropriate posts, because you might not have any inappropriate posts. It does allow them to split posts that go off topic, and also part of the role is to kind of keep the conversations going or to direct them into a certain area or to prompt people to continue the conversations. So that gives them a bit of responsibility, as does using a workshop for peer assessment, where as long as you give a very well-defined rubric, they can, for instance, this can be part of the whole process of assessment, they can comment and evaluate each other's drafts, and then they will go and they will improve their own draft and submit a final assessment to you. And again, they feel important. In terms of creativity, the idea, the concept of students designing quiz questions has been around for a while. There's at least one plugin, Student Quiz, which not only allows them to create quiz questions, which you can then use, but actually even rewards them, allows them to be rated, a bit of gamification based on how good they are, their popularity. But I wanted to point out that in Moodle 3.9, now that we have H5P, why not get them using the knowledge they're acquiring to create H5P packages? Now, I don't mean giving them teacher rights in a course. I don't mean anything like that, because you can make H5P elsewhere outside of Moodle. You can use the test site, h5p.org, and then just download it and give it to the teacher. Or, and as Vernon Spain, he's had a presentation, I think it's called lumi.education, which you can make H5P on your computer offline. And again, it gives them a sense of responsibility and creativity. Now, we're kind of delving into the area of teaching strategies and trends here. And so I don't want to take it too much further, because this is where we're actually going to be going tomorrow in our session on teaching trends and Moodle. So we'll just do a tiny bit on one today, and then we'll do this and others in more depth tomorrow. So obviously one of the ones that's always mentioned all the time is gamification, okay? And this is mentioned, you always see the words engage and gamification put together. So I've asked you, and I hope we've had some comments already. We'll look at it in two aspects quite briefly then. So gamification, I've asked you to say why you would use gamification. What are the benefits of it? What is gamification? Many people have different definitions. One thing that it's not is actually playing games, although you can play games. I'll give you the definition here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's okay. I know where I'm going. I'll give you the definition here, which is a fairly common one. The use of game elements and game design techniques in non-game context. So in other words, the key word there is non-game context. It's not about playing games, but it's about using the competitive elements that they do in online gaming. So over to you. Why would you use it?
So we have a post from Anna saying gamification, why? Well, some gamification elements give learners control of their game learning, like completion tracking and the progress bar. Some gamification elements are great to show off your qualifications, like badges. And some gamification elements may create some surprises, like auto links of hidden but available glossary, and this can be fun.
Okay, all right. I think what we'll do is we'll talk about the benefits of gamification, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about some of the some of the caveats. I like that word. Some of the caveats and maybe the disadvantages of it. So yes. It isn't just about, adding a competitive element. And unfortunately, many people think it is. So as Anna mentioned, actually, why you should use it is actually some things, for example, like badges, give them a quick thrill, if you like, at the start of the course. You get a badge for joining in. And then, and in fact, we've been using badges in our Global Moot all week, haven't we? You go into a sponsor's room, as I have, and you get a badge. And then you can maintain engagement with regular rewards, such as Stash. Stash is that plugin that you see when you pick up a cup of coffee and then you can put it somewhere in a little bundle of treasure. That's used to maintain the interest. There is also, in terms of a sense of progress, there is a plugin called Level Up, which is available with Moodle for School, that allows you to see your progress in points. Your points accumulate as you go through the course, and you can also have a leaderboard to see where you are in relation to other people. But maybe we'll talk about that in a moment. The competitive element, if you want to see where you are competing against other individuals or a group. And of course, you've got the standard activity results block for that. Also, there is, as Anna rightly said, there is that element of control, and there are things like restricting access, activity completion, group choice, all of which really is supposed to make it fun. I say supposed because we move on in a minute, but it's all to do with extrinsic motivation. And you can see our footballer there. He's playing football not because he loves it, but because he wants to win a cup. And if you have a look there, he's just got the prize, the trophy in mind. So this is extrinsic motivation. Okay, well, that's fine. However, I'm hoping Helen will come back and give my voice a rest. There is another side, there is an opposite side to gamification, and not everyone is thinking it's the best thing ever. So why might you not use it, and what are some of the things to think about?
Yes, we have got some replies to gamification. Why not? Anna says, in some cases, it might look childish. For example, if you have a course for senior managers, they might feel annoyed by leaderboards or surprising items which don't allow them to schedule their time. Mm-hmm. In some cases, it might be misleading from the learning goal. And kids may get easily obsessed with gamification items and lose their focus from learning and instead focus on gaming.
It's a very good point. Yeah, if you put too much gamification in, you know, students might forget that they're actually there to learn, and they're more interested in whizzing through the activities to get the badges, for instance, than doing the activities and the learning themselves. I've noticed you've got Nina there. We're still talking about gamification, and while she has made, and I really like this idea, a tip sheet and with green ticks on completion of certain tasks, that is a positive. She does mention that it's taken her a long time. I've made great efforts on creating an infographic style tip sheet. It can be very time consuming. As another negative of gamification, it can take you, the teacher, a long time to implement it. But of course, for some, it's useful. Is there anything else that in the forums, Helen?
I mentioned that not all learners enjoy the competitive aspect of gamification. Like some people are just not very competitive. But Joost replied saying, there are, of course, other ways to implement gamification without resorting to competition.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you might not be competitive against other people. I'm not, I don't want to play games and be in teams or anything, but I'm massively competitive against myself. And so it might be that things like, and I think Anna mentioned, the progress bar or the progress block, that is a gamification thing for you to compete against yourself to monitor your own progress. And so there's two sides to being competitive, you know. Well, Tim Tim has said gamification is extrinsic motivation, which can cause all sorts of problems. So unless you have anything else to say, Helen, I might actually move on because it's almost as if he's read my next slide.
You move on, Mary.
Okay, then. I just wanted to say, Joost has said, the right way of gamification avoids chocolate-covered broccoli. Apparently that's not supposed to be very nice, but if it gets people eating broccoli, you know. But I understand what you mean. Right, so extrinsic motivation is gamification, says Tim. Now, there's a survey here which was really interesting. I've given you the link there, where they got a large group of students who were already intrinsically motivated. So you see our footballer there, he's playing football. He's not interested in a trophy or a cup. He's playing just because he loves it. And it has been the case that if you add gamification, give it to learners who were going to do the learning anyway, they're already intrinsically motivated, it is going to turn them off. It can seem patronizing to those people who get a badge simply for submitting an assignment when they were going to submit the assignment anyway. It can be a bit annoying if you get zapped by badges all the time. And I know I've been learning Russian and I've tried various online courses, and it really annoys me to have them. If you're going to use things like badges and smash and things, you've got to use them carefully. There are also those who say that you can only really use gamification at a fairly shallow level. I don't know. I'm just raising the issue. I mean, can you successfully use gamification in a PhD philosophy, or is it only for learning vocabulary or so on? And of course, we're talking educational courses on Moodle. Gamification is used in lots of other commercial marketing environments too. So to me, the main thing I would say is that it risks being demotivating if you have students who don't need it, basically, who want to learn anyway. And I think the secret there is to know your learners. And again, it's all about building a relationship with them. I'm just going to read what Ulrike says as we go along, as we move on. Maybe if there are very strong students and very weak students in a group, it's demotivating for the weaker students. That's right. Although I suppose you could tweak your gamification elements to allow them to compete against themselves at their level as opposed to competing against others. But I completely agree. It isn't for everyone in every circumstance. And it all takes us back again to relationships and to knowing the right level of challenge as well for your learners. And challenge, I think, is really, really important in maintaining engagement. So what I'm trying to say is that, of course, you need to make your work challenging, but you've got to have balance. And that's balance in your gamification elements, if you use it, as well as in the activities that you give learners. So if you make it not challenging enough, then they're going to turn off because they're bored. If you make it too challenging, then if your activities are too hard, then they're going to turn off because they're going to give up, basically. And that's where you have to have the sense of balance. And there is something actually called the threshold concept, where you need, if you're going to be engaged and to progress, you need to struggle and struggle at just enough level to get you over the threshold into a new world of knowledge and understanding. But if it's too difficult, you're not going to go there and you're going to turn off and be disengaged. And basically that is where, if you have the right level of relationship with your learners, you can tailor the challenge to them by using the activities. So I'm coming back to the one of the first slides, which is that as long as you've got your foundation, your backbone of knowing and supporting your learner, giving them feedback, them feeling that they are important to you, that you care about them, and that you're interested and support them, then you can build your exciting, innovating, flashy activities, and so on. And so that's where I'm going to leave it, so that we have enough time to continue with the discussions. And feel free to discuss now, and I'm going to ask Helen in a minute to share from what's in the forum any of the topics that we've talked about now. I'll just end by giving you my not very exciting, innovative, flashy words, but this is what I feel is important if you're going to engage and maintain engagement, you need to build relationships. You need a sense of community. You need to support and feedback. And if you can make your learners feel important because they have a sense of responsibility, interactivity, creativity, they're going to actually want to work with the right level of challenge, okay? Now, the next slide actually says any questions, but it's not so much questions, is it, as discussions. So we have a few minutes left, so let's see what we can come up with.
Thanks, Mary. Had a few more posts going back to earlier things that, that were in previous bits of the presentation about more ideas for icebreaker activities. Heath says, I ask and show pet pictures.
Oh.
Like that. And Sam writes, what did you want to be when you grew up, aged 5, 10 and 15? Because quite often your ideas change.
So you don't want to know that I just wanted to be a languages teacher then, okay?
Well, from when you were 5?
No, from when I was 11, yeah.
Wow, cool. And Deanna says, I like to ask my students what superpower they'd want to have and why.
Oh yes, I've only in the last couple of years heard that concept of superpowers, but yes, it's quite a good one. I think the suggestions that are coming in are all things that make students think about themselves and then just get people interested in why they chose the thing that they did. So that's good, yes. Okay. Go on.
I was going to say, yeah, Fraser had some feedback on your feedback slide. He says feedback 4 doesn't work in Scotland, where not bad is the highest form of praise. And Ulrika replied, same here in the south of Germany.
Oh yeah, I absolutely understand, yes. I mean, well, also it's also the highest form of praise for teenage boys, I have to say. So if they say something is okay, it's actually really wonderful. But yeah, I mean, there are very careful cultural differences in giving feedback, because I know that in some countries, you know, the West's way of being positive is considered, you know, way too soft, and that people do need some kind of negative feedback to be pushed and alerted into making progress or making more of an effort, certainly.
I'm just checking the discussion for any new replies. It's been great, everyone's contributions.
And Heath is talking about badges again, which just reminded me. Heath is saying, I use badges for 2 reasons, gamifications, but Heath reckons not many students notice or care, or monitoring engagement to see he can see how many get awarded the badge for doing it. This also reminded me that Anna mentioned that if you do award badges, then people are very keen to put those badges into their digital backpack as a kind of a qualification. We've had that experience, for example, with our Learn MoodleMoot Completer badge and also the MEC badges. So badges go beyond just being awarded in gamification in your course. They can go outside as an example or as proof of what you've been doing.
So I think we managed to cover nearly all of the posts in the discussion thread. But remember, you're very welcome to keep on posting in there if you come up with new ideas, or indeed if you have any questions. Were there any questions there? There was one from Nina, actually. She says, I tried peer and collaborative feedback, but they've not been a great success. Any thoughts?
I think, first of all, before you try it, you would need to find out from your group of learners, you know, do you mean them feeding back to each other? I think there needs to be an element of training in how to do that. For instance, if you Google Dublin City University and Dr. Mark Glynn, they did some experiments with students working in groups and collaboratively working, and actually it didn't work so well if they weren't already experiencing it, or if they weren't told or had it explained how to do it. It's the same with a workshop activity. Peer assessment in a workshop does not work unless you give very, very specific instructions as to how to evaluate and the kinds of way of phrasing feedback. I think it's the whole teaching experience before you simply let them loose and do it, I think. But yes, please do continue to post in that forum. And also, if you want to continue, because tomorrow is kind of a continuation of today, please join us in our tomorrow session too.
Yeah, just mentioning about the workshop activity, which is a really great activity for giving peer feedback. There is the option when you set up a workshop to provide some example submissions that you can show how you might provide feedback if it's a good submission and if it's a bad submission. So that might be worth looking at if you use the workshop activity.
And you can also make it anonymous, so they don't know who is theirs and who's they're assessing and so on. That could also work well.
Good suggestion there. Okay, I think we're pretty much running out of time. Need to wrap up. So thanks again, everybody, for your participation. It's been really great reading all your posts in the discussion, and thanks again.
Thank you. Okay.